Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to wrap up those police statements. We're going to deal with Segura, Currey, and Alderete. And of those three, Alderete, who we're going to deal with last, really has an interesting take on the aftermath to the shooting on the Rust set. There's also some very interesting breaking news in terms of the legal narrative around this case. I'll tell you more about that at the end of this episode. Before we get to this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. Also, there is a series that is taking place every Wednesday where I'll be live talking about Vincent van Gogh and doing a critical analysis of an art expert's story on the last 2 months of the great artist's life. I've also written a book on Vincent van Gogh, and so that is actually a special series that happens every Wednesday, and if you want to join that, you'll need to be a member to be part of the discussion. I'll put a link to that in the description. So look out for that every Wednesday. And let's get started. So although it may feel like we're dealing with only 3 officers in this particular episode, it's actually Officer 8, 9, and 10. It's 11 officers if you also count the one that went to the St. Vincent Hospital and got Joel Sousa's statement. So we're going to start with Segura. It's actually a name that sounds a lot like a foreman that my father had working for him once. My father had a construction business, and his surname was, we called him Segura. So this is quite similar, just a little bit different. And he was in charge of the crime scene when the first search warrant was executed at 11 minutes to 7. That's quite early in the morning, kind of like first thing in the morning that Friday, October 22nd. And so this is the narrative from Segura. It is, it starts off October 21, 2021 at approximately 2:36 p.m. I responded as a member of the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Division to 545 Bonanza Creek Road, the Bonanza Creek Ranch in Santa Fe County, to assist with an investigation of a firearm that was discharged on a movie set. I learned that there were 2 individuals who had been struck with a projectile from a firearm while filming a movie at the Bonanza Creek Ranch. Upon arriving, Lieutenant Michael Martinez assigned me to be perimeter security on the northwest side of the church. The church is on the north side of the Bonanza Creek Ranch movie set. And then he goes on to say, at approximately 6:35 p.m., Sergeant Christopher Zook dismissed me from the location and I took no further action. Now, I'm not exactly sure what is going on at the end of his statement, because he writes October 25, 2021, and then under that, on October 21, 2021, at approximately 11:10 a.m., Agent Joe Vigil and I responded to 545 Bonanza Creek Road. I'm not quite sure why that date, October 25, is there. So just to reiterate, you have the date October 25, 2021, and then under that, on October 21, 2021, at approximately 11:10 a.m. And that's kind of impossible because the incident hadn't happened yet. So I don't know if that's a typo. But anyway, it looks like he went to the set in order to secure the prop truck. Right? And so the question is, when did that actually happen? Was it the 21st? Obviously not. Was it the 22nd? Possibly. Or was it the 25th? And it does seem quite late to be securing it, if it is October 25th. It just is quite curious that there's this uncertainty, this possible discrepancy around the date. So one thing we do know is what time it was, around about 10 past 11 in the morning. One presumes that was actually October 22nd, but it's not absolutely clear. And then he says that they were actually, so that the prop truck was being secured while a search warrant was being obtained. So there was obviously this quite urgent sense of, well, we should secure the prop truck before we've even got the search warrant. In other words, not a case where once they got the search warrant, they just went there. So there was the sense of we need to be there and kind of watch what is going on there and make absolutely sure what is going on in advance, right? He goes on to say the prop truck was located on the south end side of the Bonanza Creek Ranch movie set. And I don't quite know where exactly that is in relation to the church, but it does seem like it was some distance away. Anyway, he goes on to say, I remained at the location until approximately 4:35 p.m. So he was there the whole day. He was there, more than almost 5.5 hours. And he says, we were relieved by Deputy Howell Caroland. I took no further action. I have seen that there's some criticism that the prop truck was only searched 5 or 6 days later. I can't remember who said that, but I'm not sure whether that criticism is justified, given the entire set was secured within what appears to be a very short time on day one. Like I said in the previous episode, it was within 50 minutes that the set was declared a crime scene, right? Then just going a little bit further on, I think this is a second statement report from Segura. He says, on Friday, October 22nd, 2021, at approximately 6:30 a.m., I was assigned to relieve Deputy Amanda Boyle from her post on the scene at Bonanza Creek Ranch. He goes on to say, at about 11 minutes to 7, this is first thing in the morning on October 22nd, I took over the crime scene log. During the time I was in charge of the crime scene log, crime scene technician Marissa Popple, and Marissa Popple, if I remember correctly, took Alec Baldwin's clothing into evidence on that Thursday afternoon before he went in for questioning. Then there was also Detective Samantha Talamante and Detective Victor Rodriguez and Agent Joe Vigil, who executed a search warrant on the scene. OMI Larry Berger also entered the crime scene to conduct her investigation. Now, I say this under correction, but I think OMI stands for Office of the Medical Investigator and is specific to that particular state, but I could be wrong. Then he concludes by saying, at 4:36 p.m., I was relieved of the crime scene log by Deputy Furman Hernandez. No further action was taken. Now we go on to Currey. Currey kept the prop truck under observation on Tuesday, October 26th. And this is his report. He says, on Tuesday, October 26, 2021, at 0300 hours to 1700 hours, that's quite a long shift, that's 14 hours. He says, I was assigned to the Bonanza Creek village to keep the weapons and munitions movie trailer under observation. He says there were no incidents to report during this time. Then there's a second report from him. I think it's a him. He says, on Tuesday, October 26, 2021, at 16:43 hours, I spoke with Catherine Walters, or Catherine Rowe Walters. One of the movie set crew advised me that she could put in the codes to unlock the padlocks securing the truck. Now, what is quite interesting is that Catherine Rowe Walters does come up as I don't want to call her a player, but certainly a character in the story of what happened with the Rust. There's Hannah, there's Sarah, there is Serge, there is the director, there's the producer, but then there's also this particular person. There's also Lane Looper, and so Catherine Walters also emerges as a person that kind of pops up every now and then. We also dealt with her in the previous episode where, if I understood correctly, she apparently was sort of at the door of the church trying to find out what had happened or who had been injured, and while some of the officers were inside. Anyway, he goes on to say Ms. Walters advised she could do this, meaning put the codes to the locks, and that in the event Santa Fe County detectives returned with a warrant, they would need to contact her and wait for her return in order to give them access to the armory props truck. So it's kind of a situation where the props truck needs to be secured, but it also needs to be accessed, so it needs to be unlocked. And so you can almost argue it both ways. On the one hand, you could say, oh, wow, you know what, the truck wasn't even locked when the police were investigating, but the police actually asked for it to be unlocked even though they were, it was under surveillance, if I can put it that way. The question is, was it under surveillance from the first day? Exactly when did that surveillance begin? But that's certainly a possible legal loophole, is to say someone could have gone into that truck and planted something, etc., etc. So according to Currey, Ms. Walters unlocked the padlocks in place and left them in their current location, but unlocked. And then it's specified here that at no time was the truck opened or the seal broken. As I say, a defense might argue that the prop truck could have been interfered with because it was unlocked. However, as I say, it was taped shut and the seal wasn't broken, which suggests the scene was secured. And now we go on to the very last officer, and this is a really interesting narrative from Alderete. And he says that he encountered Alec Baldwin on the set and also drove Dave Halls to the police station. One wonders what was said during that drive. And so this is his report. On Thursday, October 22nd, 2021, at approximately 1:48 p.m., I think that's also a typo, it should be Thursday, October 21st. He says, I was dispatched to 545 Bonanza Creek Road in reference to 2 persons that had sustained gunshot wounds. While en route, dispatch informed responding deputies the location was a movie set and a prop gun was discharged and 2 people were accidentally shot. Deputy Nicholas Lafleur was first on scene, and I arrived on scene with Lieutenant Tim Benavides after. I observed a church with wooden siding and several movie staff members were pointing in the direction of the front door, giving me directions of where the gunshot victim was at. Medical staff with the Santa Fe County Fire Department were also on scene. Lieutenant Benavides began securing the south side of the scene as I began securing the north side. I'm not quite sure if he means the south side of the church or the south side of the entire movie set. Anyway, he says, a care flight helicopter also landed shortly after my arrival and medical staff exited and rushed to save the 2 gunshot victims. I'm not actually sure if Joel Souza had already left the building and left the area by the time the air support, the helicopter, arrived. Anyway, while medical personnel was performing life-saving techniques in the church on the female who was later identified as Elena Hutchins and a male who was identified as Joel Souza, I secured the front door to the church, ensuring no one would enter. So from his description, it does sound like the helicopter arrived while Joel was still there. Anyway, he says, once medical staff removed Joel and Helena from the church and into an ambulance. Now, if you take his words verbatim, it sounds like Joel and Helena were taken out of the church at the same time, and we know that that's not the case. So although these narratives are true, some of the technicalities are sometimes not strictly speaking accurate, if that makes sense. It might be broadly accurate, but some of the time detail, some of the fine print might not be completely accurate. Anyway, he goes on to say, I secured the perimeter around the church with crime scene tape. While doing so, I was approached by a male that told me he had to talk to me. I told the male that I would be with him shortly after I'd conducted my duties. The male told me that he had to talk to me because he was the one that fired the firearm. Now, I must say on that particular point, someone made a comment where they said, you know, if you take what Alec Baldwin said on the ABC interview, he said, I didn't pull the trigger. You know, I didn't fire the gun. And in this report, he says, the male told me that he had to talk to me because he was the one that fired the firearm. Again, one's got to ponder, is he interpreting what was said to him? Is he rephrasing it? Or is that what was told to him? It could be legally quite important. In this respect, this particular officer's body cam is quite useful, quite important, possibly, and hopefully the audio would pick that up if it is of legal import. Anyway, he goes on to say, I looked at the male and recognized him to be well-known actor Alec Baldwin. I told him to wait by a prop truck and that a deputy would speak to him about the incident. And, that sounds like he is waiting, that the prop truck is quite near to the church, if that makes sense. And I think if they were securing the church, if the prop truck is right there, would that be very difficult to, maintain a kind of vigil over kind of thing? Anyway, he says, I completed securing the perimeter around the church. I stood at the north side of the perimeter as Lieutenant Benavides secured the south side. Deputy Jose Puentes and Michael Sanchez arrived to assist with keeping people out of the scene. The Criminal Investigations Division arrived on scene and took over the investigation. I was tasked with going through a roster of movie set staff that was on the property that day to determine who was actually on the property when the incident took place. I went through the roster and determined who was on scene. The roster was then given to Agent Joe Vigil. I then transported Assistant Director Dave Halls to the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office so that detectives could conduct an interview with him. So what's quite interesting here, I did mention it in the previous episode, is that in this case, the police transport Dave Halls to the sheriff's office, whereas Alec Baldwin was allowed to drive behind another officer. Then he goes on to say, this concluded my involvement in the case, etc., etc. Now, I've got a question for you. What do you think of a situation where a perpetrator or suspect approaches the police? It could even be via phone call, but basically approaches the police in some way, wanting to say what has happened, and the officer that is approached essentially says, not now, I'm busy, not now. Could this lead to a scenario where someone who is at first wanting to be forthcoming later has second thoughts? Someone who wants to give a version of events that is going to be raw and real later has an opportunity to rethink whatever they were going to say. So the question is, should you stop what you're doing as the police officer and make sure you get that statement? Of course, you don't always know, in hindsight what the situation is. It's difficult to know at the time how seriously to take what is happening. In any event, the other thing is, or should all statements be on the record? Is it right for the police to say, not now? If you're going to make a statement, we need to make sure that we have it, recorded. We have the right person asking you questions, and it's in a proper setting. What do you guys think of that? Also, bear in mind who we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a powerful actor. We know that subsequent to these events, this actor went onto ABC and gave that version of events to them, right? So I'm not going to take it further than that. I do want to tell you that there's been some very interesting, a very interesting legal development in terms of the beginnings of a wrongful death being filed, and it looks like Helena's husband has now begun to petition in that respect, and I'll be dealing with that in the next episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.